The boy they called Eli learned early that silence was safer than words, and his sister Lila learned the same lesson at the same time, because they had entered the world together on a rain night 13 years ago in a quarter cabin that leaked like a broken bowl. People said twins shared a soul. On the Bell Ridge plantation in southern Georgia, people said many things in whispers, and most of them were meant to keep children from asking questions that could get them killed. Bell Ridge sat between a stretch of swamp and a long, slow river, and the land around it was the kind that seemed to drink sound. You could scream into the trees and the trees would keep it. You could cry, and the mud would swallow that too. From the big house, the fields rolled out like a green ocean, cotton plants bending under the sun, and beyond them the dark line of forest waited like a wall no one was meant to cross. Eli and Lila worked in the fields since they were big enough to carry sacks. They were small for their age, thin as switch branches, but they were quick, and quickness was sometimes the only thing that kept a whip from touching your back. They did not talk much, not to each other and not to anyone else. They did not need to. When Eli felt something was wrong, Lila was already turning her head. When Lila froze, Eli was already stopping. People noticed that. People always notice what doesn't fit. The overseer, a red-faced man named Cutter, said once that the twins were unnatural quiet. He said it like it was a bad smell. They ain't right, he told the master, and the master, Mr. Hargreave, only smiled in that thin way of his and said nothing. Strange things had been happening at Bell Ridge long before the twins were old enough to understand what strange meant. Tools went missing from locked sheds and turned up days later hanging from tree branches far from the fields. A mule once disappeared overnight and was found 2 days later standing knee-deep in swamp water, alive but shaking. Eyes rolled white, as if it had seen something it could not explain. Once, a whole stack of cotton sacks was discovered neatly piled in the middle of a path that no one ever used, as if someone had wanted them to be found. The slaves whispered about spirits. The whites blamed theft and laziness. Cutter blamed everyone. Eli and Lila noticed something else. They noticed that the woods were not always the same. Some days, on the walk back to the quarters, Eli would see a crooked pine leaning left, and the next day it would be leaning right, or a fallen log that should have been near the creek would be closer to the field, or a narrow deer path would vanish, swallowed by brush that hadn't been there before. He never said anything, neither did Lila. But at night, lying side by side on their shared pallet, they would stare at the dark and listen to the swamp insects, and know that the land itself was shifting, just a little, like a man turning in his sleep. The day everything began, the air was thick and grey, the kind of day that made your lungs feel heavy. The cotton scratched at Eli's fingers as he worked. His sack was half full. Cutter was on his horse, watching, chewing something, his eyes always looking for a reason to be angry. Lila straightened for a moment to stretch her back, and that was when Eli felt it. Not a sound, not a sight, a change. Like the moment before a storm breaks, he looked up at the far edge of the field where the cotton gave way to tall grass and then to the dark trees. Something was wrong. The line of the forest was not where it should be. It was closer, just a little, like it had taken a step. Eli blinked. The feeling didn't go away. Lila had frozen. Her sack hung forgotten from her shoulder. She was staring at the same place. They did not move. Around them, people kept working. Nobody else seemed to notice. "Girl," Cutter shouted, "you paid to stare at trees?" Lila flinched and bent back to work. Eli did the same. The unease stayed in his chest like a trapped bird. That night, after the horn blew and the quarters filled with the low sound of tired bodies and quiet talk, Eli and Lila slipped out. They did not plan it. They never did. They simply looked at each other, and both knew. The moon was a thin, pale curve. The path toward the swamp was one no one used unless forced. People said there were snakes big enough to swallow a child. People said there were places where the ground would open and take you. People said many things. They walked anyway. The night air was cooler and full of sounds that seemed too many to count. Frogs, crickets, the distant hoot of something that might have been an owl, or might not. They went to the place where the forest had seemed to move. Up close, it looked normal. Trees, vines, shadows. But Eli felt it again, that wrongness, like the world had been stitched together badly here. He took a step forward. The ground did not feel the way ground should. It was not soft. It was not hard. It felt waiting. Lila caught his arm. They stood there, breathing quietly. Then Eli saw it. Between two thick trunks, there was a narrow space that looked darker than the rest of the dark. Not a shadow. Not exactly. More like a hole that someone had forgotten to fill in. He leaned closer. The space did not get bigger. It got deeper. He could not see the back of it. Lila shook her head just once. Eli should have listened. He reached out with one hand. The air inside that dark gap was cold. Not night cold. Not swamp cold. It was the cold of deep water and buried things. He pulled his hand back fast. They did not speak. They turned and walked away, faster than they had come, their hearts beating too loud in their ears. Back in the quarters, they lay awake for a long time. The next morning, the place was gone. The trees stood as they always had. No dark gap, no wrongness, just forest. Eli felt like he had dreamed it, but Lila did not relax. Over the next days, things grew worse. A white man from a neighboring plantation came to visit and did not return. His horse came back alone, saddle empty, eyes wild. Cutter organized a search. They went into the woods with dogs and guns. They came back angry and empty-handed. The dogs would not go near the swamp edge. They whined and pulled back, tails low. Cutter beat one of them. It still would not go. Then the punishments began. Someone had cut the harness straps in the barn. Someone had spilled a barrel of nails across the main path. Someone had left a blood-red mark painted on the side of the cotton shed, a shape that looked like nothing, and like too many things at once. Cutter said it was the slaves. Mr. Hargreaves said, find out which ones. The fear in the quarters grew thick. People started locking their doors at night. People prayed. People argued. People accused. Eli and Lila watched. They noticed that the forest edge crept a little closer each week, not enough for most to see, enough for them. One evening, an old woman named Ruth, who knew things people pretended not to know, caught Lila's hand as she passed. You children been listening to the ground? She whispered. Lila said nothing. Ruth nodded slowly. That's what I thought. That night, Eli dreamed of walking through trees that bent away from him, opening paths that closed again as soon as he passed. He woke with his heart racing. A week later, Cutter took a boy from the quarters, saying he had been seen near the barn. The boy came back with blood on his shirt and could not stand straight. He said nothing. He only cried. That was the night the twins went back. The forest was not the same. The dark gap was there again, wider. Eli could see something inside, not shapes, not light. More like the idea of a path. He took a step. Lila grabbed his arm. He looked at her. She looked scared, but she did not pull him away. They stood there a long time. Then a sound broke the night. Dogs. Not far. Not close. But coming. Shouts followed. Men's voices. They were searching again. Eli did not think. He stepped forward. The world tilted. For a moment, he felt like he was falling sideways. Then he was standing in a place that was not the forest. The air was colder. The ground was firm and smooth, like packed clay. The trees were still trees, but they stood in different places, spaced in a way that made no sense. He turned. Lila was not there. Panic punched him in the chest. He spun around, calling her name without sound. Then she was there, stumbling forward as if she had tripped. They stared at each other. Behind them, the dark gap was gone. Ahead of them, the forest opened into a narrow, winding path that seemed to fade and reappear as they looked at it. They could still hear the dogs. But the sound was wrong, distant, muffled, like it was coming from another world. They walked. The path twisted. Sometimes it split, and sometimes it joined itself again. Sometimes a tree that had been on the left would be on the right. Time felt strange. They did not know how long they walked before they reached a place where the ground dipped and rose again, and the trees formed a circle. In the center of that circle was a small, still pool of water. The water was so clear it looked like there was no water at all. Eli stepped closer. He saw the sky reflected. Then he saw something else. He saw the plantation, not as it was, as it had been, as it would be. He saw people running. He saw fire. He saw dogs turning away. He staggered back. Lila saw it too. He could tell by her face. They did not stay. When they turned to leave, the path was not where it had been. They walked until their legs hurt. At some point, without noticing when, they were back at the edge of the real forest. They slipped into the quarters before dawn. No one noticed. But the next day, the man who had been leading the search was found tangled in vines a mile from where he should have been, alive but babbling about trees that moved, and the forest edge was closer again. Eli and Lila understood something then. The land was not just land, and it was listening. They did not speak about what they had seen, not to anyone and not even to each other. But the silence between Eli and Lila was no longer the quiet they had always shared. It was a heavier silence now, full of things pressing to be said. When Eli closed his eyes, he still saw the pool and the way the water had shown him a world that was not yet and somehow already broken. When Lila closed hers, she felt the strange smoothness of that other ground under her bare feet and the way the trees there had seemed to lean, as if listening to their passing. The land was listening, and now, in a way they could not yet explain, it was answering. The morning after they returned, Belridge woke in a bad mood. The air was too still, the birds were quieter than they should have been. Even the cotton plants seemed to sag, as if tired before the day had begun. People whispered about the man found in the vines. He had been brought back on a wagon, his eyes wide and empty, his mouth working as if he was still trying to speak to something no one else could see. By noon, he had been taken away again, to somewhere that was not Belridge, and nobody ever heard what became of him. Cutter was worse than usual. He rode up and down the rows looking for reasons. When he did not find them, he made them. A woman who moved too slowly, a boy who dropped his sack, a man who looked at the ground instead of at his work. The whip cracked like small thunder, and each sound made Eli flinch, even when it did not land on him. Lila worked with her head down, but her eyes kept drifting just for a moment at a time to the forest. It was closer, not by much, but it was closer. At midday, as they ate their small portions in the thin shade, old Ruth sat near them. She did not usually. She was careful about where she sat and with whom. But today she lowered herself slowly to the ground beside Lila and Eli, her joints creaking like old wood. "You children been walking where you shouldn't," she said softly, not looking at them. Eli froze. Lila's hand tightened around her food. Ruth's eyes were on the trees. "This place got seams," she went on, "like a badly sewn shirt. Sometimes the stitches come loose." She looked at Lila then. "You feel it, don't you?" Lila did not answer, but she did not look away either. Ruth nodded as if that was enough. "Be careful what you ask the land for," she said. "It got a way of answering that don't care what you meant." That night Eli dreamed again. He dreamed of the path, but this time it was wider. He dreamed of walking it alone. He dreamed of turning around and seeing Lila far behind him, the space between them stretching like taffy, growing and growing until he could not reach her, no matter how fast he ran. He woke with a cry caught in his throat. They did not go back to the forest that night. They tried to pretend they could forget, but forgetting was harder than going. 2 days later, something happened that made the pretending impossible. A small girl named May, no more than 7, wandered away from the quarters near dusk. People thought she had gone to the creek, or to look for a lost ribbon, or just walking, the way children do. When her mother realized she was gone, the sky was already turning orange. They searched until the sky was black and the frogs were singing. They found nothing. In the morning, Cutter took men and dogs. The dogs would not go near the forest edge. They pulled and whined and lay down. Cutter beat them. They still would not go. Eli stood in the field and watched the line of the trees. He felt that trapped bird feeling again, beating and beating in his chest. He knew. He did not know how he knew, but he knew. Lila felt it too. That night, they went back. The forest welcomed them like a mouth opening. The dark gap was there, waiting. This time they did not hesitate. The world tilted again, and then they were on the other side. The air was colder. The path was clearer, as if it had been walked more. They moved quickly, not wanting to think about the dogs and the men and the little girl. The forest here was wrong. Trees stood too close together in some places and too far apart in others. Shadows bent in ways shadows should not. Once, Eli saw something that looked like a stump until it moved and became a rock, and then became nothing at all. They came to the pool. The water was still. Eli knelt. He did not want to look. He looked anyway. He saw May. She was sitting on the ground, crying, her small hands dirty, her dress torn. She was not hurt, but she was not alone. Something stood behind her. It was tall, but not like a man is tall. Its shape kept changing, as if it could not decide what it wanted to be. Eli jerked back with a gasp. Lila saw his face and did not need to look. "She's alive," Eli whispered. They followed the path that seemed to lead where the water had shown. It was not a straight walk. Sometimes they would come to a place that looked like it should open, and it did not. Sometimes they walked in circles without meaning to. At one point, Lila stumbled, and when Eli reached for her, his hand went through her arm as if she was smoke. They both cried out, and then she was solid again. They did not stop. They found May near a stand of twisted trees that grew in a spiral. She was alone. When she saw them, she screamed. Then she recognized them and ran, sobbing, into Lila's arms. "Something was there," she cried. "It talked like my mama, but it wasn't my mama." Eli felt cold all over. They did not argue about what to do. They took her hands and ran. The path seemed to fight them. It narrowed. It bent back on itself. Once they came to a place where three paths met, and all looked the same. Lila closed her eyes. She took a step to the left. The others followed. The air changed. A moment later they were falling sideways again. They stumbled out into the real forest. The dog's barking was far away. They got May back to the quarters before dawn. Her mother's cry woke half the cabins. People said it was a miracle. Cutter said it was a lie. He questioned everyone. He did not question the twins, not yet, but he watched them. After that, the forest did not stop. More things vanished. Sometimes they came back. Sometimes they did not. Once, a white overseer's boy went missing near the river. He came back 3 days later, clean and calm, and would not speak. He did not scream in his sleep. He did not laugh. He did nothing. People began to whisper different whispers. Not about spirits, about doors. Eli and Lila did not go every time. But sometimes when the feeling came, they began to understand the path a little. It was not fixed. It was more like a thought, or a memory, or a decision the land had to keep making. They learned that fear made it harder. They learned that holding hands made it easier. They learned that the land did not like guns. One night, they saw men with torches moving through the other forest, their shapes distorted and stretched. The men shouted and cursed and fired into the trees. The trees closed around them. The sounds stopped. Eli did not know if they were dead. He was not sure that was the right word for what might have happened. The more they used the path, the more the real forest changed. Trees moved, trails vanished, the swamp seemed to spread. Cutter noticed, Mr. Hargreave noticed. They talked in the big house with doors closed. Then men came from far away, men with better guns, men with calm eyes. They said they were there to solve a problem. The first thing they did was chain a line of people together and march them to the forest edge. They said they would burn it. The land answered. That night fire would not stay lit. Torches went out as if drowned. The air turned wet and heavy. The swamp rose in places it had never been before. One man fell into a place that had been solid ground an hour earlier. He did not come back up. The men began to look afraid. Eli and Lila stood in the dark and watched. They felt the land listening, they felt it waiting, and for the first time, Eli understood something that made his stomach twist. The land was not just helping, it was learning. The land was not just helping, it was learning. Eli felt that truth settle into him like a stone dropped into deep water, sending slow, widening circles through everything he thought he understood. For days after the night the men tried to burn the forest, Belridge existed in a strange, held-breath silence. The torches had failed. The guns had sounded wrong in the thick, wet air. Their echoes swallowed too quickly. The men who had come from far away walked with less certainty now, their eyes always flicking toward the trees as if expecting them to move when they weren't looking. Cutter was furious. He took that fury out on whoever was nearest. The whippings became more frequent. Smaller mistakes were punished harder. A drop tool, a crooked row, a glance held too long, everything became an excuse. People started walking with their shoulders tight and their eyes low, like animals that know a trap is somewhere but not where. Eli and Lila felt it too, the tightening. But they also felt something else under it, something like a low hum in the ground. The land was restless. It was choosing. They did not talk about that part. Not even to each other. Some things were too big to give names to. It started with Mr. Hargreave's prize mare. She was found one morning standing in the middle of the main road, perfectly calm, reins still on her head, but her stable door was still locked and the key was still on the hook in the tack room. Cut. Tare swore it was witchcraft. The men from far away said nothing, but one of them, a tall, thin man with grey at his temples, knelt and studied the ground around her hooves. "There ain't no tracks," he said quietly. That made Cutter angrier. 2 nights later, the cotton gin jammed. When they opened it, they found not just cotton inside, but a careful, neat knot of rope woven into the machinery in a way that made no sense. No one admitted to putting it there. No one could explain how it got there. The men from far away began to walk the edge of the forest every day. They never went in. They marked trees with paint. They drove stakes into the ground. They argued in low voices. Eli watched them from a distance and felt the hum in the ground get stronger. Then the punishments found a new shape. Cutter announced that someone had been stealing and sabotaging. He said that until the culprit was found, there would be examples made. The first example was a man named Jonah, who worked in the barn. They said he had been seen near the gin. He said nothing when they tied him to the post. He only closed his eyes. The whip came down. Eli counted the blows without meaning to. He lost count. That night the quarters were very quiet. Lila sat with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the wall. Eli sat beside her, his hands clenched. "They gonna keep doing it," she said finally, her voice small but steady, "till something breaks." He knew she was right. They did not say what that something might be. The land seemed to answer for them. The next day Cutter took 2 men and went into the forest anyway. He did not go far. People saw him from the fields, his red face, his hat, his shoulders stiff with anger. He came back alone. His face was grey. He did not say what he had seen. He did not take the whip out. That night, one of the men from far away did not return to his camp. In the morning, they found his gun leaning against a tree at the forest edge, clean and oiled, as if someone had taken care to place it there. They did not find him. The tall, grey-haired man's eyes went hard. "This ain't chance," he said. Mr. Hargreaves said they would double the watch. They put up more lights. They kept more men awake at night. It did not help. Eli and Lila felt the pull again 2 nights later, stronger than before, urgent. They did not argue. They slipped away, quiet as breath. The dark gap was wider now. It did not look like a hole anymore. It looked like a doorway that had always been there. The sideways falling came and went, and then they were on the other side, in the other forest. The hum was louder here, almost a vibration. They did not know where they were going until they were there. They came to a place where the trees had grown in a long, crooked line, like a fence that had been bent by time. On the ground something lay that did not belong. A man's hat. One of the men from far away. They followed a trail that was not a trail. Not footprints exactly, more like places where the ground looked disturbed, as if it remembered being stepped on. They found him near a shallow dip in the earth. He was alive. He was also not. His eyes were open, but they did not see. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. His hands were clutching something that looked like a root, but when Eli looked closer, he saw that it was not a root at all. It was a piece of wood shaped too much like a hand. Lila knelt. She did not touch him. "He ain't here," she whispered. Eli felt it too. Whatever made him him was gone. They did not know what to do. The land seemed to decide for them. The hum shifted. The air thickened, the ground near the man softened and then opened, not like a mouth, like a seam coming undone. The man slid down slowly, gently, as if being laid to rest. Then the ground closed. Eli and Lila stood shaking. They ran. When they came back, the world felt heavier. 2 days later, Cutter announced another example. This time, it was a boy not much older than Eli. They said he had been seen near the forest at night. That was enough. They tied him to the post. The whip came down. Something in Eli broke. He did not plan it. He did not think. He felt the hum surge up from the ground, through his feet, into his bones. Lila grabbed his hand. He felt her do it. And in that moment he knew the land was not just listening. It was listening to them. The first crack of thunder came from a clear sky. People looked up, confused. The second crack came from the ground. Not an earthquake. Not exactly. More like the sound of a giant tree splitting. The post shuddered. The rope snapped. The boy fell free. Everyone froze. Then the forest moved. Not all at once. Not in a way you could point to and say, "There, that is it." But paths that had been open were suddenly gone. Trees leaned. Shadows thickened. The men shouted. Cutter shouted louder than anyone. "Get them dogs!" he screamed. The dogs came. They ran toward the forest edge. They stopped. They whined. They turned back. The hum was everywhere now. Eli felt dizzy. Lila squeezed his hand so hard it hurt. The men with guns raised them. Then the ground near one of them gave way. He fell up to his waist, screaming. Another man tried to pull him out. The earth took both. Panic broke loose. People ran in all directions. Some ran into the forest. The forest did not give them back. By the time the sun set, Belridge was not the same place. 3 men were gone. The boy was alive. Cutter was locked in the big house, drunk and shaking. Mr. Hargreave did not come out. That night the quarters were full of whispers that were not afraid in the same way as before. Eli and Lila sat in the dark and tried to understand what they had done. "We didn't tell it to," Eli whispered. "I know," Lila said. They both knew that was worse. The land did not need to be told any more. It was choosing, and Eli was afraid that soon it would choose in ways they could not stop. It was choosing. That thought stayed with Eli like a splinter under the skin. He could not see it, could not pull it out, but every time he moved it reminded him it was there. Belridge moved differently now. People walked as if the ground might decide something about them at any moment. Some did not sleep. Some prayed. Some stared at the forest as if trying to memorize it before it changed again. Cutter did not come out of the big house for 2 days. When he did, he looked smaller. He still carried the whip. He still shouted. But there was something behind his eyes now that had not been there before. He kept looking at the trees as if they might answer him. The men from far away held a long talk with Mr. Hargreave. After that, new rules came. No one was to go near the forest edge. No one was to walk alone. No one was to be out after dark. They put up more lanterns. They built more fences. The fences did not last. A section of them was found one morning neatly laid on the ground, every post pulled out as if by careful hands. No footprints. People began to whisper a new kind of whisper, not just about the forest, about the twins. Eli felt it when eyes stayed on them a little too long. He felt it when people stopped talking as they passed. He felt it when someone made the sign of the cross under their breath. Lila felt it too. "They think it's us," she said one night very quietly. He did not argue. There was nothing to argue with. They did not go back to the other forest for a while. Not because they did not feel the pull. They did. But it felt different now, heavier, as if something on the other side was no longer just opening doors, but waiting to see which one they would choose. Then, one evening, old Ruth came to them again. She did not sit this time. She stood in the doorway of their cabin, her back bent, her eyes sharp. "You children done stirred something up," she said. Lila looked at the floor. Ruth sighed. "Ain't saying you shouldn't have. Just saying, when you wake old things they don't always remember who asked first." She reached into her dress and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She placed it in Eli's hands. It was a piece of old yellowed paper. Not a real map. Not like the ones Mr. Hargreave kept. It was covered in lines and curves and marks that did not look like rivers or roads. Some of the marks seemed to overlap, as if the person who drew them had changed their mind halfway through. In one corner there was a shape that looked like the twisted trees where they had found May. "What is this?" Eli whispered. Ruth's mouth twitched. Something someone made a long time ago when they started noticing the seams. "Who?" Lila asked. Ruth shook her head. "Don't matter now. They ain't here." "Does it?" Eli hesitated. "Does it show the way?" Ruth looked at him for a long moment. "It shows ways," she said. "Not always the ones you want." That night they felt the pull again, stronger. They took the paper. The forest swallowed them. On the other side, the hum was louder than ever, almost a pressure behind their eyes. The air felt thick, like before a storm. Eli held the paper up. It did not look the same. Some of the lines had shifted. "Did it change?" Lila asked. "I think," he said slowly, "it's changing with the land." They walked. The path did not fight them this time. It seemed to open, just a little ahead of their steps. They came to places Eli did not recognize, a ring of stones half buried in the ground, a fallen tree that looked like it had grown that way, a hollow where the air was so cold it made their breath fog. Once they heard something moving not far away, not footsteps, more like something heavy being dragged. They did not go toward that sound. They reached a place where the forest thinned and the ground dipped into a long, shallow bowl. In the center stood a single tree taller than the others, its bark pale and smooth. The hum was strongest here. Eli felt like his teeth were buzzing. The paper in his hand grew warm. "This is—" Lila started. He nodded. He did not know what it was, but he knew it was important. Then the ground shifted, not violently, not yet. Just enough to throw Lila off balance. She stumbled. Eli reached for her. His hand closed on nothing. She was not there. He spun around. "Lila!" No answer. Panic surged up so fast it made him dizzy. He saw her 10 steps away, but also not. She looked stretched, like her shape had been pulled thin. The space between them did not look like normal space. It shimmered like heat above a road. "Don't move," he shouted. She looked at him, her eyes wide. "I can't feel my feet," she said. Her voice sounded far away. Eli took a step toward her. The distance did not change. He took another. Nothing. It was like trying to walk toward a reflection. The hum grew louder. The tree in the center of the bowl seemed to lean. Eli looked down at the paper. The lines were shifting fast now. One of them faded. Another grew darker. He did not understand it. But he felt, somehow, that the paper was not telling him where things were. It was telling him what the land wanted. He closed his eyes. He thought of the path that had brought them here. He thought of the way the forest had opened for them before. He took a step not toward Lila, but sideways. The world tilted. He nearly fell. Then he was closer. Not by much, but closer. He took another step, not forward, not back, but in a way that did not have a name. The air changed. Suddenly he could feel the ground again. He lunged. His hand closed around Lila's arm. She was solid. He pulled. For a moment she did not move. Then she came free, and they both fell to the ground, gasping. They lay there for a long time. Neither spoke. When they sat up, the bowl was gone. The pale tree was gone. Shh! I was standing in a part of the forest. Eli did not recognize. Lila was shaking. "I thought," she whispered, "I thought I was going to go somewhere I couldn't come back from." Eli did not tell her that he had felt the same. They walked back in silence. On the way, they saw something that made Eli stop. A man. Not one of theirs. Not one of the men from far away. He was dressed strangely, in clothes that looked old, but not like slave clothes, and not like the master's either. He was sitting on a fallen log, staring at his hands. When he saw them, he looked up. His eyes were very tired. "You shouldn't be here," he said. His voice echoed wrong. "Who are you?" Lila asked. He laughed, a short, broken sound. "Someone who took the wrong path." "How long you been here?" Eli asked. The man thought. "I don't know. A day, a year, maybe more." "What happened to you?" "I followed a map," he said, and nodded at the paper in Eli's hand. Eli's stomach tightened. "There are places this land uses," the man went on, "and places it throws away." "Uses for what?" Eli asked. The man's smile was not a happy one. "To learn." Before Eli could ask more, the man's shape wavered, like heat, like Lila had. Then he was gone, not vanished, just not there. They did not try to follow. When they finally came back to the real forest, dawn was breaking. They hid the paper. They did not sleep. 2 days later, a white man from the big house disappeared. Mr. Hargreave was furious. He accused everyone. Then one of the men from far away said something that made the air go cold. "We're not dealing with a place," he said. "We're dealing with a system." Eli did not know what that word meant, but he felt in his bones that the land was no longer just reacting. It was planning, and worse. It was beginning to decide who belonged to which side of its plans. It was beginning to decide who belonged to which side of its plans. That thought sat between Eli and Lila like a third presence as they moved through their days. They did not say it out loud, but everything they did now bent around it. The paper Ruth had given them stayed hidden under a loose board in their cabin floor, wrapped again in cloth, but Eli could feel it even when he was far from it, like a low ache that told him a storm was coming. Belridge was changing in small, frightened ways. People did not linger outside after dusk anymore. Even Cutter, who used to ride late and shout into the dark just to hear his own voice, kept closer to the big house. The men from far away stayed, though, and more of them came. They brought wagons and crates and long rolls of wire. They talked about boundaries and measures and control. The forest did not seem to care. Paths that had... Oh, notice patterns. When the men with guns walked the forest edge, the thing appeared more often. When someone vanished and did not come back, Eli would sometimes see that tall, wrong-moving shape the next day, just for a second, as if the forest was showing him a piece of itself at work. Old Ruth saw it too. "You hear it?" she asked one night, sitting outside their cabin, her eyes on the dark. "Hear what?" Lila asked. "Footsteps that don't touch the ground." Eli felt cold. "What is it?" he asked. Ruth was quiet for a long time. "Don't know," she said finally, "but I know this. It ain't new, and it ain't free." "What do you mean it ain't free?" Lila asked. Ruth looked at her. "Nothing that learns is free. Learning always costs." 2 days later, the cost came close to home. A man named Thomas, who worked in the fields near Eli and Lila, was accused of trying to run. It was not true. He had a wife. He had a new baby. But someone said they had seen him near the forest at night. That was enough. They tied him. They dragged him. They were going to make an example. Eli felt the hum rise up from the ground again, but this time it was different. It was not just a pressure, it was a question, like the land was waiting to see what he would do. He looked at Lila. She was already looking at him. They did not speak. They did not have time. The men were shouting. Cutter was shouting louder. Then, between the trees near the path, the shadow appeared, but it was not a shadow anymore. It stepped forward. It had a shape now, almost a shape. Tall, thin. Its surface looked like bark and smoke and darkness layered together. Where its face should have been, there was only a shifting suggestion of features, like someone trying and failing to remember a human face. The shouting stopped. Even Cutter went quiet. The thing did not rush. It did not need to. It walked. The ground did not change under its feet. The air did. People backed away without realizing they were doing it. Thomas was still tied to the post, eyes wide, mouth working. The thing turned its head. Eli felt somehow that it was not looking at Thomas. It was looking at the men with guns. One of them raised his rifle. It did not fire. The man looked at it, confused, and then at his hands. The rifle was no longer there. It was lying 10 feet away, gently placed on the ground. The thing took another step. Someone screamed. Someone ran. The forest seemed to lean in. The thing did not chase. It simply walked to the post, lifted one long, wrong-shaped limb and touched the rope. The rope fell apart. Not cut. Unmade. Thomas collapsed. The thing did not look at him again. It turned and walked back toward the trees, and the trees opened for it. When it was gone, the world seemed to breathe again. No one spoke for a long time. Then Cutter shouted. He shouted about demons and tricks and cowardice, but his voice was shaking. That night, the men from far away argued in their camp. Eli and Lila could hear them from the edge of the quarters. Words like contain and isolate and burn it all were thrown into the air like sparks. Eli lay awake and thought about the man who had followed the wrong path and become nothing. He thought about the shape that walked like the forest's hand. "What if," he whispered into the dark, "it ain't on our side?" Lila did not answer right away. "Maybe it don't got a side," she said finally. "Maybe it's on the land's." The next time the pull came, it did not feel like a suggestion. It felt like being summoned. They took the paper. The lines on it were more active than ever, sliding and darkening and fading as if something beneath the page were breathing. On the other side, the forest felt awake. They did not wander this time. They were guided. They came to a place where the ground sloped down into a long corridor of trees, their branches woven together overhead so that only thin lines of light reached. He ground. In the middle of that corridor, something waited. It was the same thing, or something like it. Up close, Eli saw that its surface was not smooth. It was made of many textures: bark, stone, something that looked like cloth, something that looked like skin. It did not attack. It did not even move toward them. It simply stood. The hum was almost painful now. Lila swallowed. "Can you hear us?" The thing tilted its head, not in a human way, in a way that made Eli think of a tree leaning toward light. Images flooded his mind, not words. He saw the forest as it had been before the plantation. He saw men cutting and burning. He saw the land breaking in ways that did not heal. He saw lines being drawn and redrawn. He saw something like doors being forced open. He saw the man with the map. He saw many others. The thing was not one creature. It was a function, a way the land corrected itself. "And us," Eli whispered. More images. He saw himself and Lila walking paths that did not exist. He saw people being pulled away from danger. He saw others being sorted. He felt sick. "You use us," Lila said, not angry, just stating. The thing did not deny it. "What happens when we're not useful anymore?" Eli asked. The images stopped. For a moment, there was only the hum. Then he saw the man again. The one who had followed the wrong path. He saw him fade. Eli's chest felt tight. They did not stay longer. On the way back, they saw a group of men from far away in the other forest. They were setting something into the ground, metal rods connected by wire. The land did not like it. The path twisted and closed behind Eli and Lila as they left. The next day, one of those men did not return. The day after that, 2 more were gone. Mr. Hargreave made a decision. He would bring soldiers, real ones. Belridge buzzed with fear and rumor. Eli and Lila sat in their cabin and held hands. "The land's gonna fight," Eli said. Lila nodded. "And it ain't gonna care who gets caught in the middle." That night, Eli saw the shape again, walking the far edge of the fields where the light from the big house could not quite reach. It was not looking at the forest. It was looking at the quarters. And for the first time, Eli understood something that made his blood run cold. The land was not just defending itself anymore. It was preparing. And preparation meant choices. And choices meant that soon, very soon, some people would be saved. And some people would be taken. Some people would be saved. And some people would be taken. That truth sat over Belridge like a low cloud that never moved. Eli felt it in the way the air pressed against his skin, and in the way even the birds seemed to avoid certain trees now. The shape that walked between the trunks appeared more often, sometimes only as a suggestion, sometimes clear enough that more than one person saw it and crossed themselves or whispered prayers that had nothing to do with hope. The men from far away stopped trying to pretend they understood. They sent messages. They waited. When the first soldiers arrived, the plantation changed again. They came in neat lines, boots clean, faces set. They brought more guns than Eli had ever seen in one place, and they brought tents and wagons and crates, marked with words he could not read. They set up their camp on the far side of the big house, as if they wanted to keep one eye on the forest and one on the quarters at all times. Mr. Hargreave walked with them, and talked with them, and pointed. Cutter walked behind, quiet. The soldiers did not whip people. They did not need to. Their presence was its own kind of threat. They posted guards at the forest edge and along the paths. They began counting people in the quarters every morning and every night. Containment, one of them said, as if the word were a spell. The forest did not move for 2 days. On the 3rd night the hum began again, low and steady, like cess. Something huge turning over in its sleep. Eli lay awake with Lila's hand in his, listening. "It's coming," she whispered. He knew she was not talking about the soldiers. The pull came before dawn. Not gentle, not like before. It was a weight behind his eyes and in his chest, a direction that felt as clear as north. They took the paper. On the way out, they saw old Ruth standing in the shadow of her cabin. She did not try to stop them. She only nodded once. "Remember," she said softly, "the land don't care about numbers, it cares about shapes." Eli did not understand what she meant. He would on the other side. The forest was brighter, but not with light, with activity. The hum was everywhere, and the paths were more solid than he had ever seen them, like the land had decided what it wanted them to be. They did not wander. They were taken. The shape was waiting for them, in a place that felt like a crossroads, though there were no signs and no roads. Only many directions the forest could be. This time, it did not just show them images. This time, it gave them a feeling, pressure, urgency, and beneath that something like agreement. Eli's mind filled with the plantation, seen from above, as if he were a bird. He saw the quarters, the big house, the fields, the lines of soldiers. He saw doors opening and closing, paths folding in on themselves, spaces stretching and compressing. He saw groups of people moving, not all, not most, some. "An escape," Lila whispered, not a question. The shape did not nod, but the hum changed, and Eli felt that same answer in his bones. "Not everybody," Eli said. The images shifted. He saw confusion. He saw some people hesitating, some people running the wrong way, some people being caught. He saw places that closed. He swallowed. "You're gonna sort them," he said, "like before." The shape did not deny it. "What do you want from us?" Lila asked. The answer came as a kind of map that was not a map, layered over the paper in Eli's hand and over his thoughts at the same time. Times, moments, movements that had to happen together, doors that would only open if someone was there to open them. "You want us to lead," Eli said, "to be the first through some of those doors, to hold others open, to choose sometimes when to let them close." The weight of it made his knees feel weak. "They'll die," Lila said. "Some of them." The images did not argue. Eli felt something like anger, sharp and bright. "And if we don't?" He saw the soldiers moving in lines. He saw fire. He saw the forest burn in ways it did not want to burn, and he felt a tearing, not just of trees, but of whatever made the land itself work. He understood then, this was not just an escape. It was a negotiation. They left the other forest in silence. The next day, the soldiers announced a search. They said they were looking for weapons. They were not gentle. They went cabin to cabin. They found nothing. They took 3 men anyway. That night, one of those men did not come back. The hum was louder. Eli and Lila began to prepare in the only ways they could. They spoke quietly to people they trusted. They did not tell them everything. They told them enough. "When you hear the dogs," Eli whispered to a man named Samuel, "don't run where you always run." "When the lights go out," Lila told a woman with 2 small children, "hold on to me, don't let go." Some people believed them, some did not. Old Ruth believed them. She came to them the night before it happened and pressed something into Lila's hand, a small smooth stone, warm to the touch. "For luck?" Lila asked. Ruth shook her head. "For remembering where you are when the ground forgets." The soldiers chose a morning when the fog was thick. They said they would count everyone. They lined people up in the fields. They brought dogs. The hum began to rise. Eli felt sick. Lila squeezed his hand. The first crack of thunder came from a clear sky. The soldiers looked up, confused. The second came from the ground. Paths shifted. Not everywhere, not for everyone, but enough. Somewhere, a fence fell. Somewhere else, a lantern went out. The dogs began to bark, then to whine, then to pull back. Eli felt the pull and stepped forward. Lila stepped with him. They did not run. They walked straight toward the forest edge, and a small group moved with them without quite knowing why. A soldier shouted. A gunshot cracked. The bullet hit a tree that was not where the tree had been a second before. The tree was gone. The forest opened like a held breath being released. People ran, not all in the same direction. That was the point. Some ran and found only brush and guns. Some ran and found paths that should not have been there. Eli and Lila moved like the land itself was moving them, turning when they did not mean to, stopping when they did not want to, always just ahead of hands reaching for them. They saw Samuel stumble and fall. Eli grabbed him. They saw the woman with the children freeze. Lila pulled her forward. They heard screaming behind them. They did not turn. They reached the dark gap. It was huge now, not a gap, a doorway. They went through. The sideways falling was violent this time, and when they came out the other side, more people came with them, spilling and stumbling and crying out. The other forest was full of motion. Paths were opening and closing like breathing lungs. The shape was not in one place. It was everywhere and nowhere, a pressure and a direction. "Follow them," a soldier's voice echoed, wrong and distant from somewhere that was not quite here. Some soldiers came through. They did not last long. The land did not like guns. The ground softened. Trees leaned. Paths bent back on themselves. Eli saw one man run in a circle, shouting, until the circle closed. He vanished like he had never been. They moved, always. Sometimes the path was wide and easy. Sometimes it was a crack in the world that only one person could pass through at a time. Once, Lila was on one side and Eli on the other, and the space between them stretched like before, and for a terrible second he thought he was going to lose her. Then she stepped in a way that did not have a name, and was there again. They lost people. They saved people. There was no clean line between the two. At one narrow place, a man with a limp fell and could not get up. Eli tried to go back for him. The path was gone. He still heard the man's voice for a while. Then he did not. They reached the pool. The still water was gone. In its place was a broad, shallow passage that led into a forest that felt quieter, safer. The hum was softer there. People collapsed. Some cried, some laughed, some just stared. Eli and Lila stood, shaking. "How many?" Lila whispered. He did not know. He did not want to count. Behind them the passage narrowed. Then it was gone. On the far side, in the real world, Belridge was burning. Not all of it, but enough. The soldiers did not follow. They could not. The land had made its choice. That night, as people huddled together in a place that was not quite anywhere, Eli felt the paper in his pocket grow still for the first time since he had known it. The land was quiet, not finished, but satisfied. For now, and Eli understood something that made his chest ache. This had not been the end of the land's learning. It had been a lesson, and lessons meant there would be more tests. It had been a lesson. Eli did not understand that at first. Not fully. In the quiet place beyond the passage, beyond Belridge, beyond the smoke and the shouting and the dogs, he only understood that his body hurt, and that Lila was alive, and that there were many people around them who should not have been there, and yet were. The forest here was not like either forest he knew. It was thinner, calmer, as if the land itself had chosen to loosen its grip. They stayed there for a long time. No one knew how long. Days, maybe, or weeks. Time did not behave the same way. Some people tried to go back. They could not find the way. Some people said they would rather die than go back. Some people did. Others began to move, following paths that seemed to lead out into a wider world. Eli and Lila did not lead anymore. They walked, they helped, they kept quiet. The paper stayed still. Old Ruth did not come through. Eli never found out why. Years passed. They found places where no one asked too many questions. They found work that did not come with whips. They found nights that were quiet in a different way, but the land never completely left them. Sometimes Eli would feel that hum again, very faint, like a memory of a sound. Sometimes Lila would stop in the middle of a road and say, "This place got a wrong edge," and they would walk another way. They did not talk about Belridge, not because they did not remember, because remembering felt like touching something that might still be hot. They grew, they changed, they learned to read a little, to write their names, to listen in new ways. They tried to become ordinary. The world did not let them. It started with stories. A preacher in a small town told a story about a plantation where the forest ate men and freed slaves. A newspaper in another place printed a strange little column about a vanished. Too long, a small farming town where no one asked much. He came at dusk. He did not sit. "You're done running," he said. Eli felt the hum before he saw him. It was faint, but it was there. "We ain't running," Lila said. "We're living." The man snorted. "You're a problem, both of you. People like you turn stories into infections." Eli stood. "You don't get to decide that." The man's eyes flicked to the trees at the edge of the town. "Oh," he said, "we decide a lot more than you think." He leaned closer. "We're going back to Georgia, and you're coming with us." Lila's hand found Eli's. "No," she said. The man sighed. "I hoped you'd say that." That night 3 men tried to take them. They were quiet, they were careful, they were not careful enough. Eli did not know if the land heard him or if it had never stopped listening, but the hum rose, not loud, not like before, just enough. One of the men stumbled on a step that had been solid for years and fell down a short, sharp drop that should not have been there. He broke his leg. Another turned a corner and found himself not where he should have been and ran in circles until he ran out of breath and sense. The third saw Lila look at him and hesitated. That was all it took. They did not chase them. They left. They knew what it meant. After that, the men changed their approach. They did not try to take Eli and Lila anymore. They tried to take the story. Books were written. Official reports were filed. The incident at Belridge became a footnote, then a rumor, then a local legend, then nothing. Eli and Lila grew old, not together at first. They separated for a while, not because they were angry, but because being together made the world too watchful. They wrote letters. They met again years later in a place where the trees were thin and the ground was dry and quiet. They sat on a porch and watched the sun go down. "Do you still feel it?" Lila asked. Eli nodded. "Sometimes." "Do you think it's done?" she said. He thought about the shape that walked between trees, about the way the land had learned. "I don't think it ever is," he said. "The men who wanted to erase them kept working, slowly, patiently. They outlived many of them, but not all." One day a young woman came with a notebook and careful eyes and a voice that did not try to be gentle. "My grandfather died." Fire, the shape of fear, the shape of hope. And sometimes, when the pressure becomes too much, it answers. The place that had once been Belridge did not look like much anymore. A scatter of stones, a line of old oaks that had grown into strange leaning shapes, a marshy dip where a field had been. If you did not know, you would walk past and think nothing of it. If you did know, you would feel a faint wrongness in the air, like standing near a deep well and not seeing it. That was how the young woman found it. Her name was Margaret Hale. She did not believe in ghosts. She believed in records, and in the spaces between records. She had found those spaces in her grandfather's papers, sketches of seams, notes about non-Euclidean displacement, angry letters from men who told him to stop asking the wrong questions. He had died without proving anything. Officially, he had died chasing a story. Unofficially, he had died too close to something that did not want to be written down. Margaret did not come looking for a story. She came looking for a boundary. The first night she camped near the old oaks, nothing happened. The second night her compass needle spun once and then pointed in a direction that was not north. The third night she dreamed of paths that closed behind her and woke with the taste of cold water in her mouth. She took notes. She always took notes. On the fourth day she found the stone. It was small, smooth, warm to the touch, even though the air was cool. She did not know why she picked it up. She only knew that when she did, the air around her seemed to settle. She felt a hum, very faint. She followed it, not with her feet at first. With her attention, the place where the ground dipped had a wrong curve to it. The trees around it were not quite evenly spaced. The shadows did not match the light. She set up markers. She measured. She wrote. Nothing fit. That night she dreamed of two children standing at the edge of a field, holding hands. When she woke, she was not afraid. She was certain. She went back to town and asked questions. No one remembered Belridge. Some remembered a fire, some remembered soldiers. Some remembered nothing at all. An old man in a bar said, "Place was always bad ground," and would not say more. She went to the courthouse and dug through records. There were gaps, not the normal kind, pages that had been removed, ledgers that ended in the middle of lines, a report that said only, "Incident resolved." Site abandoned. She smiled when she saw that resolved was a word people used when they did not know what else to write. She went back. This time she did not camp at the edge. She walked into the dip. The hum was clearer there. She closed her eyes. She thought about doors. The ground did not open. Not yet. It took weeks. Margaret was patient. She did not force. She listened. She learned the way the light moved, the way the insects avoided certain spots, the way the air felt heavier in some places than others. And one evening, when the sun was low and the shadows were long, she felt it, a seam, not a crack, not a hole, a place where the world was, folded. She stepped sideways. The world tilted. She did not panic. She had read her grandfather's notes. She had practiced breathing slowly. She had practiced not trying to grab onto the wrong things. She came out the other side on her knees, her heart pounding. The forest was not like the one she knew. It was quieter, but not empty. She stood. The hum was stronger here. She walked. Paths appeared, not always where she expected. She saw far off, something that might... She said out loud, "I'm not here to use you." The hum changed. "I'm not here to contain you or to burn you or to explain you away." The forest did not move. She swallowed. "I'm here to understand what you remember." The air grew colder, not hostile, focused. Images came to her, not like visions, more like impressions pressed into her thoughts. She felt people running. She felt dogs stopping. She felt doors opening and closing. She felt hands holding hands. She felt a choice being made again and again and again. She felt something like sorrow and something like resolve. "You're not a place," she whispered. "You're a process." The hum deepened. She laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because it was right. "You're a correction." She saw then, not clearly, not with her eyes, but she understood. This land had been damaged in a way that was not just physical. Lines had been forced through it. Boundaries that did not belong had been hammered in. The world had been made smaller here, and the land had learned how to push back, not all at once, not cleanly, but persistently. She stayed for days. Time did not behave. She saw the shape that walked between trees or something like it, and she did not run. It did not come closer. It did not need to. She spoke into the quiet. "They're still trying," she said. "You know that, don't you?" The hum did not deny it. "They always will," she went on. "They like things that stay put, that can be named and owned and filed away." She thought of her grandfather, of the way his notes had ended. "They're going to find you again," she said. The forest did not answer in words. It showed her a line of possible paths. Some led to burning, some led to being buried, some led to dispersal, not destruction, distribution. She felt a chill. "You want to spread," she said, not physically, conceptually, to become harder to fence in, harder to point to and say, "Here, this is it." You want to become a pattern. The hum was almost a yes. Margaret sat back on her heels. "That's dangerous," she said. She saw then not just escape, but confusion, not just doors opening, but doors opening for the wrong reasons. She saw people lost in places that did not care about them. She saw learning without guidance. "You already know that," she said quietly. She did not know how long she sat there. When she stood, her legs were stiff and her head was full. She went back the way she had come. The seam let her through. In the real world, only an hour had passed. She packed her camp. She did not leave right away. She wrote not in her notebook. She wrote letters. To people who studied strange boundaries. To people who studied systems that learned. To people who believed, as she did, that not everything that mattered could be owned. Some of them wrote back. Some of them did not. A year later, a man in a grey suit stood on the edge of the old dip and said, "This is just a marsh." Margaret stood beside him and said, "Yes and no." The man smiled. "We're putting a road through here." Margaret felt the hum very faint under her feet. "You can try," she said. The man's smile did not change. The first survey crew got lost for 6 hours in a place that had no business being that large. The second crew found their markers moved. The third crew quit. The company wrote it off as cursed ground. They built the road somewhere else. Margaret did not celebrate. She knew better. Years passed. She published papers that were careful and incomplete. She never wrote the full truth. Not because she did not want to, because she knew what would happen if she did. People would come with drills and wires and theories. They would want to make it repeatable. They would want to own it. She wrote instead about adaptive boundary phenomena, about self-correcting spatial systems. She buried the heart of it under language that would only attract a certain kind of reader, the kind who listened. Sometimes at night, she dreamed of two old people sitting on a porch, watching the sun go down. She never knew their names, but she thanked them anyway. The land did not become safe. It never had been. It did not become kind. It had never been that either. But it became quieter, wider, less centered on one place. People still disappeared sometimes, in forests and deserts and cities where the lines were too tight and the pressure too high. Sometimes they came back changed. Sometimes they did not come back at all. And sometimes, in the rarest cases, someone walked through a door that should not have been there and came out somewhere they could live. There were still men who tried to erase those stories. They always will. They called them accidents. They called them hysteria. They called them lies. But they could not stop the remembering, because remembering was not happening in books. It was happening in the shape of the world. Margaret grew old. On her last trip to Georgia, she stood at the edge of the dip and felt the hum one last time. "It's not a story, is it?" she said. It was not. It was a warning. Not carved in stone, not written in ink, written in the way the ground sometimes refuses to stay the way you tell it to. She left the small, smooth stone at the edge of the trees. It was warm. Somewhere, not far away and not quite here, something listened, and somewhere else, someone felt, for just a moment, that the world was not as closed as they had been taught, that there were still seams, and that some of them, if you were very careful and very quiet and very willing to accept the cost, could still be opened.